Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody! I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Ellen Snee. Ellen has been at the forefront of women's leadership for more than 25 years. Dr. Snee brings strategy, research, and executive experience to global companies and their top female talent. Her original research at Harvard University on women's experience in roles of authority formed the foundation of her consulting and coaching work with Fortune 500 companies such as Cisco, Goodyear, Marriott, Pfizer, and Schwab. Later, as the global VP of Leadership Development at VMware, she launched its business initiative, VM Women, to attract, develop, advance, and retain talented women. Her new book, Lead: How Women in Charge Claim Their Authority, makes accessible her wisdom and experience to all women seeking to accelerate their careers. Dr. Snee lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she continues to coach and advise women leaders and executives worldwide, and frequently speaks to companies and conferences. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ellen Snee. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you, Tammy. It's a delight to be here.
It is a delight to have you here. So, Ellen, if I may call you Ellen.
Oh, please. Please.
I've called you that before, so I figured it was okay. So, Ellen, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to start with your earlier years, your formative years, whatever those are to you, in terms of any early influences or things that you might want to touch on and share with the audience, and how those might have informed or not where you are today.
I'd be happy to. I am the oldest of 5 of an Irish Catholic family and grew up outside New York City where I was born. And we had a parish priest who became a family friend, and he would come on Wednesday nights to our house for hot dogs or pizza and cards after that. And when he would leave, when he would be about to leave, one night, my devout father asked him if he would give us his blessing. So we all closed our eyes in prayers, and he said some prayers over us. And while we were praying and everyone was calm, I thought, I know what I want to be. So when it was over, I stood up, age 12, and declared for all to hear, when I grow up, I'm going to be a priest.
Wow.
Now, as you may know, in the Catholic Church, girls and women cannot become priests. But I was pretty naive at 12 and did not realize that. So the adults looked at each other, trying to figure out who was going to tell me the truth. And Father Tom said gently, well, Ellen, I think you mean you want to be a nun. And I said, no, I want to be a priest. At which point, all the eyes rolled and my mother said, okay, kids, time for bed. And my father escorted Father Tom to the door. And that night, as I processed what had happened, it was the beginning of my life's work to change the world for women so that they can become whatever it is they want to be.
And so, was that a topic that you brought up again at any point?
It died a quiet death.
Yeah.
But many years later, when I was time to go to college, I chose to go to a Jesuit university because they were not only priests, but they were educators, they were global, and it was a curriculum and an atmosphere that really appealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, the desire to be a priest returned.
Oh, interesting.
But again, I knew I couldn't become a priest. So I thought, well, maybe I'll be a nun if I can find a group of women who are like the Jesuits.
Ah.
But this was 1972, and everyone was leaving the convent and the priesthood, not coming in. But a long story short, I found, serendipitously, I met a woman who was a religious of the Sacred Heart, who are often called the female Jesuits. And I knew I had come home. And they were the order that I joined and was a part of for 18 wonderful years. A group of wonderful, generous, smart, educated women who ran colleges and high schools and nonprofits. And I learned a great deal from them. Most of all, that women can be extremely effective as leaders and as leaders in authority. It gave me a unique experience of seeing every position almost held by a woman, women who are totally different in age and personality and management style, but they all did a fabulous job.
So it's interesting, the context in which you speak of joining the order and the context of becoming a nun in and admiring the kind of leadership that that nuns were taking. I'm wondering, how old were you when you joined the order? I'm assuming there was a process involved.
I began the process at 23.
Mm-hmm. So after you graduated?
After I graduated from college, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what was that process like? And were you thinking in those terms at that time? Could you articulate it in some way around the notion of women being empowered in some way? I mean, clearly in some ways they were empowered, in some ways they weren't, right?
I think at that point in my life, what I had experienced at Fordham was a combination of community, education, and commitment to prayer and service. Mm-hmm. And I was seeking a way to live my life in that context. And so this community of women provided the community, provided the mission of education and service, and a life of prayer. Mm-hmm. And it also was a time when there was still considerable work being done to make it possible for women to become priests. So I was still fairly hopeful that would still happen within my lifetime. Mm-hmm. I think as I was in religious life, I held many positions as a teacher, as a campus minister, and then pursuing my doctorate. And throughout all of that, there was always an opportunity to amplify the voices of women, to encourage other women of all ages to follow their heart, follow their calling, and to make a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. And so it was a place where I really had the opportunity to contribute, but also to grow enormously.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, when did you decide to go for your doctorate?
Well, there's a good story behind that. If you'd like to hear the story.
Yeah.
I was at that moment in charge of admissions. We called it vocation ministry. So I was the person who met with women who were considering, did they want to be a nun and did they want to be a member of our order? And a lot of that involved interviews. And I wanted to be trained to be a better interviewer. And the company that provided the training had a tool for priests and a tool for nuns. And the tool for priests was all about listening for skills in leadership and direction and protection and inspiration. And the tool for nuns had much more to do with service and being pious and kind of subservient.
Yeah.
And I knew that the tool for the priest corresponded to what we were looking for, but they would not let me use it. They would not let me train for it. So that was when I decided I would go and study women's psychological development and create a new tool. And in the course of all that, I read a book. And the book was In a Different Voice by Carol Gilligan. And in that book, she explores what she learned from interviewing women and girls and how she uncovered a different human voice. So it wasn't about gender comparisons, but it was about understanding something new about our human experience from listening to girls. And you may know that much of psychological research at that point was done only with men and often Harvard undergraduates, your typical person.
Yep.
So
yes, your average person, right?
Your average person, Harvard man.
Everyone's like that.
Right. So I decided I wanted to study with her and went to Harvard because she was there. And while I was there, I became more interested in issues of leadership and had a chance to study that topic at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And the intersection of women's psychology and leadership theory that was being presented in the early 90s opened up a new insight for me.
Yeah.
Much of the discussions around leadership, both in that course and in the literature of the time, were trying to reinforce the importance of what we call today soft skills, of listening, of collaborating. And that's understandable given the fact that most of the leaders had been men. But I knew from my experience that women were fabulous at those skills. And so it was like, well, isn't there more? And what I began to think about was what were the challenges for women when they hold a role of authority? Women are great at motivating people as a leader, but what are the challenges when they are in a role of authority? And that led me to my dissertation research, where I interviewed women who had held roles of authority, both in mixed gender groups and those who had worked only in female environments.
Oh, interesting.
And what I discovered was that a role of authority frequently makes a woman feel as though she has one eye on her role and responsibility and one eye on the relationships. And it leads to a kind of split. It leads to discomfort. The power of the authority role becomes very uncomfortable for a woman who is very good at the soft skills of leadership. I believe people can develop the frameworks for listening. And
Yes.
I am delighted to see how much attention and interest in mindfulness and meditation and really listening to the within is present in today's society.
Yeah.
And we're learning from different cultures in that
Right.
as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, originally I was supposed to pursue a doctorate in theology because I was going to change the church from inside out by teaching in a seminary.
I see.
But lots of things happened. I was asked to take this national role of admissions and recruitment. And I did that for 6 years. And during that time, I decided to pursue studies in women's psychological development. So while I was at Harvard and in my studies, I began to have questions about the future. There were dimensions of it that were personal, dimensions of it that the Catholic Church itself had become much more conservative. And so I went on a retreat with a much trusted and loved mentor. And while I was on retreat at this beautiful retreat house up in Gloucester, Mass, and I was praying one day, looking out at the ocean, and I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden I saw a frog. And I was like, kind of trying to sharpen my inner eyes to see, what is that? Is that really a frog? And a moment later, I knew it was a frog, and I knew what it meant. By now, most people know the story of the frog.
Right.
That was relatively new in those days.
Right.
But I had heard it a year before at a conference, how a frog who jumps in hot water knows to jump out. But a frog in water, if you turn up the water slowly, it accommodates and dies. And I knew I was the frog.
Wow. So that was it. That really landed for you.
That was it.
Yeah.
And it was a story that, as you say, landed for all of my friends who were shocked that I was making this decision. But when I told them the frog story, they got it.
Yeah. So again, another transition for you. And that was big. I imagine that was not an easy one.
It was quite big, but I was still in graduate school. And if you know anything about graduate school, you have a very supportive community. So it didn't feel as dramatic and traumatic at the moment. And then I graduated, and I wanted to do something for women and with women. And this was 1994.
Yeah.
And so I decided to be the reluctant entrepreneur and start my own business. And I wanted to offer services to companies for their women. And everyone said, "You're crazy. No one's going to hire you just for women." And I said, "Well, we'll see."
Right.
And I had a fortuitous event happened where I was introduced to a group that were launching a women's leadership program, and I helped run that part of that every year for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And the participants were all from Fortune 500 companies. And they would come and then invite me back into their company to coach their senior women and to offer programs on mentoring and leadership. And so my company took off like crazy.
Wow. And so, but at some point along the way, you were offered a full-time role at VMware, it sounds like, right?
That's true. That's true. I moved to California in 2002 after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I decided life was short and I wanted sun. So I moved out here, and that was probably the most traumatic transition of my whole life. But a few years later, I was coaching clients at VMware. And one day I was talking with the head of HR, and she just made a side comment of, "Oh, I wish we could afford to hire you." And I went home to my husband, because I was married by then, and said, she just said this really odd thing. And he said, "Well, go ask her what she means."
Yeah.
And so I did. And the rest was history. And it was a wonderful experience. I loved being inside a company. I loved helping it grow. And toward the end of my sojourn, we had a chance to launch an initiative for women. And what I'm most proud of is that we did it as a business initiative. And by that, I mean, we engaged a senior executive from each organization as the core team. We used data, tons and tons of data. We collected data on hiring, promotions, retention for 5 years at every level, and compared the men to the women with, where it was equitable, it was green, and where it wasn't, it was red. And then I went to each of the top executives and presented the binder of all his or her data. And it took absolutely no convincing. They would look at the data and they'd say, "Oh, okay, now what do we do?" And so with that buy-in, it was very easy to put in place the steps that were needed to make that change. And they were accountable for those steps to the CEO. And 3 years later, their bonus was attached to their results.
Nice. Wow, that must have been so rewarding to be able to see that, to be a part of developing that and then seeing that through in that way. And that's, I think, one of the distinctions, perhaps, between being an outside consultant and being in on the inside. Not that outside consultants don't sometimes get the opportunity to do that, but I think more often that would be more of an inside kind of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I left graduate school, we had a panel come and talk about careers in consulting. And one of the guys, I'll always remember, said, "Well, it's wonderful to come up with these plans and get people to do them, but the hard part is you don't get to execute on them." And I thought, if that's the hard part, that's the job for me, because I was all about ideas.
Yeah.
But having been on the inside, where you can influence people with power, and they have the capacity and the ability and the resources to make things happen.
Yeah.
I would always choose to go back inside.
Oh, really?
Really, because you can make things happen in a way you can't as an outsider.
Right.
And that was the most exciting and meaningful and impactful program I've ever been a part of.
Wow. And just to double check here, so you had graduated and started your own business and moved to California. You had been doing your own business for about, am I getting this right? Had you been doing it for about 10 years when you joined VMware? Is that right?
Longer than that. I had been doing it closer to 20.
Oh, okay.
So it was actually very scary to give it up and go.
Yeah,
inside.
That's what I was. Yeah, that was another brave move on your part. So you've made some very, very big decisions, big transitions, along the way, and then you left VMware.
I did. A moment came when the initiative was duly launched and was in the hands of the executives.
Yeah.
And my husband's health at that time was starting to fail, and he was quite a bit older than I. And so it just seemed like the right moment. It was not an easy decision. Because I loved the company and the people, but it was the right decision.
Yes. Well, sometimes, that's what happens in life, right? Mm-hmm. There are all kinds of things that we have to, balance out. So tell us about your book, Lead.
That's right.
How Women in Charge Claim Their Authority. When did that start to, when did you plant the seed, and how long did it take you to grow that plant, so to speak?
So the first thing I always say about writing a book is I was a math major in college because I didn't know how to read and write. So anyone out there who doesn't think they can do it, you can do it. You just have to keep your seat in the seat.
Wow.
Someone had said to me while I was still working, "You've had such an interesting life, you should write a memoir." So when I stopped working full time, I started taking classes at Stanford Continuing Ed in writing, and I started writing a memoir.
Oh.
And after 2 years, I had 238 pages of a memoir. And the reason I had that was I had what I thought was a fabulous title. And when I came up with the title and everyone loved it so much, I felt I had to write the book. And you probably want to know what the title is.
Yes.
The title was going to be From Convent to Corporate.
I love it.
So I thought, with a title like that, no one else is going to be able to steal the title. I'm going to write the book. But so I go off to a writers' conference in November of 2018 with my 235 pages of a memoir to meet agents and publishers and teachers. And I take this course on how to publish a book.
Yeah.
And the professors, who are known as the book doctors, and I highly recommend them. The first day they were like, what you're talking about, that's not really a memoir. It should be a leadership book. And I was like, no. 232 pages. No, I'm not going to listen. And then Tuesday we had the same battle. And Wednesday morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I knew they were right. And I was ecstatic because I knew they were right. And I could just see how important it was to write this leadership book. And I was excited. I was floating from the ceiling. And I kept saying to myself, Ellen, when you get home and you have to start over, you're not going to be so excited. But I did. I came home and I started over, and I turned it into a leadership book.
Wow. So do you think that there's room for both? A memoir and a leadership book?
I'm sure there is room for both. I don't foresee myself writing the second book, but I've learned to never say never.
Oh, I can imagine that would probably be, you know, part of your mantra, never say never, because you've done a lot of different things.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So tell us. So you took the book and you reworked it. It sounds like, and I mean, you weren't starting from scratch.
No, I had a lot of stories and a lot of thoughts, and I knew that in addition to the courses that I had taken, I needed a writing coach. And I reached out to Brooke Warner, who I had met at conferences, and she took me on, and she helped me to reorganize and frame the story for the new book. Because you can't take a story from one genre to another and just slap it in. You have to really rethink the whole framework.
Right.
So it was a process of coming up with a framework. And then she had someone on her team who worked with me as a developmental editor. And then I asked her if, in her other role as a publisher, would She Writes Press be willing to publish it? And she was absolutely said yes.
Wonderful.
So she's been a wonderful partner. When my husband became ill and died during this process, she was not only compassionate, but really made sure it was possible for me to finish the book and get it published despite all that was going on. And then COVID struck. So,
yay. Wow. So how wonderful, that you made that decision to turn to her at that time. And she became such a important, I'd say, strategic partner in the whole project.
Absolutely.
Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. And
the other thing I would say about that is that She Writes Press is largely women authors, not exclusively, but almost all are women authors. And there's a tremendous community online that we form as a whole body, and then each publishing cohort of 6 months that are coming to publication at the same time. And so there's a wonderful sense of camaraderie and support that she has created for the authors above and beyond what she delivers as a publisher. And that was really important to me.
So it's called She Writes Press. Oh, interesting. I like that. And her name is Brooke.
Right. Brooke Warner.
Brooke Warner. That's really interesting. How wonderful. So all these different twists and turns and communities that you have cultivated in your life. And so now you've written a book, you have hung up your shingle again, you're in business again. And who are your primary clients now? Who do you see as being kind of in your, I'm actually, what I'm curious about, as you wrote the memoir and then moved it into more of a leadership book, were you envisioning the same people reading it? Or did you think that your audience shifted at all as you changed the book over?
Oh, I absolutely saw that my audience shifted.
Yeah.
Because when I shifted to the leadership book, when you're writing a book, the first thing they tell you is to identify your audience.
Yes.
And for me, my audience for this book is women from 25 to 45.
Okay.
And those who are trying to support them as managers, coaches, mentors, spouses, or friends. What I have found is that many of the people who enjoy the book the most are actually, 45 to 70, but they read it saying, oh, I wish I had this book when.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a wide range of people who can either read it and recommend it to other people, which I would definitely do. And we will have obviously links to your book and all your social media in the show notes as well. So now I will go back to my other question, which was, so tell us about the work that you are now doing these days now that your book is out. I know you're spending some time talking about your book. Who else are you working with these days? What else are you doing?
So there are three things I'm focused on. One is getting the book out, but also finding opportunities to speak.
Yes.
On podcasts, on conferences, and in companies.
Yes.
Companies that have women's groups or have speakers come to really bring the message in and to foster conversations about these topics.
Right.
So it's speaking and then coaching. I am coaching women typically at the vice president or above level, or senior directors who seek to be vice president. So it's primarily women in organizations who are seeking or being encouraged to move up into more significant roles of authority. That could also include women who run their own business, who are entrepreneurs, who are in administrative roles in academia or the professional services.
Right.
So that is the coaching. And then the third is really trying to develop more educational materials. So in October, we're going to be launching a 4-week series that will be free as a pilot on taking different topics in the book, one each week, with a guest speaker who can speak to her experience around that. So we're going to look at issues between performance and promotability.
Nice.
We're going to look at power and influence.
Nice.
And then we're going to look at networking and your expanded community.
Great.
And then my hope is in 2022 to be able to provide that as a program online or in companies.
Nice. That's great. I can think of a few people I'd love to send to that. So that's wonderful. Well, I wish you all the best with that too. I know there are a lot of people who are going to benefit and get a lot of value out of that.
Well, thank you. That's my hope.
Yes, I no doubt in my mind. So Ellen, one more question before we wrap up. If you were to give someone who's considering what their next move might be, or they're trying to figure out what to do, and they're in transition mode, whether they're going to leave a job or they're trying to think about maybe doing something new, what would be one piece of advice you might give them as they're entering a transition mode?
I would say start by listening to your heart to see what it is you desire and you're drawn to.
Right.
One question or exercise I give my clients is to go back over their career and identify the places where they've been the happiest and the most successful, and identify the characteristics of that time and job. What were they doing? With whom? In what kind of setting? With what results? Because that's the data to be using in discerning your inner voice.
Yes, that's great.
But it doesn't stop there. You need to bring that into dialogue with another person.
Yes.
Because we're not an island. We are in community. So reach out to your best friends, to coaches, to mentors, to people who may not be best friends.
Right.
And always ask for the difficult comment. Ask people to give you their difficult feedback, not just what you want to hear. Because sometimes that will be an important cue.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
And then finally, I'm never good at just one.
That's okay.
Take all that and do something I learned as a nun in discernment. And figure out 2 options. And give yourself a week to live with one option, as if it was going to become the reality. And just live with it.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Sleep on it. See how you feel.
Yeah.
And then the next week, do the same with the other option.
Nice.
Because our emotions and our body will tell us what they think about what we have put together with our head.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great way for somebody to really try to make a good decision, is to live with as if it's going to happen. Yeah. That's great. Well, Ellen, I can't thank you enough for generously sharing so much of your story with us, and tremendous amounts of wisdom about how you navigated the path, and this great advice that you offered at the end. And I can't encourage people enough to check out your book, Lead: How Women in Charge Claim Their Authority. I think it's going to be a big, big, big success. So wishing you all the best, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Tammy. And if I may, if anyone wishes to reach out or be in contact, our new website, which goes live next week, will just be my name, www.ellensnee.com. And everything you need to know is there.
And it'll all be in the show notes. So people will have, and next week will have already occurred by the time this airs. So they will see your new website because it'll already be up. So it'll all be available in the show notes, and we will make sure that people know how to find you. No doubt about it. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tammy. It was a delight.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Ellen Snee. It was so interesting to speak with her to learn about her personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at tammygulerloeb.com. Just look for episode 146. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Do you feel maybe a little stuck? Stay tuned for my new book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It'll be available in November 2021, print and digital ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores. If you are inspired by this episode with Ellen, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd really appreciate reading your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.